Greetings, it's the 8th of February, 2025. We're entering the second week now of February, the first full month of the second Trump administration. And it's starting to not look as apocalyptic as it seems, for a variety of reasons. A lot of the resistance to the lawlessness that we have been seeing has been starting to solidify, and people have started to regain their focus and footing, and in a truly miraculous way. And let's appreciate, by the way, as things start getting better, and I know it's very, very early to be saying this, but as things start getting better, we are prone to forgetting how bad things could have been. Let's provide a counterfactual of, remember January 26th or so, towards the end of the month, the upper 20s of January. Trump is already in power. Everybody is in shock about his executive orders and just wondering what he's going to do next. And he orders a bunch of troops and himself. He has freshly purged the ranks of the military over the previous days using either Hegseth or his acting secretary, depending on when it is. And he marches these soldiers into Congress illegally, but again, he's the commander-in-chief. What are they going to do, say no? Maybe they do. That's a different story that isn't so bad, but they obey. Let's say they obey. They're handpicked for loyalty, and they go with him into Congress, and he says a bunch of pretext words about a conspiracy against him, and he removes everyone from the building that is a Democrat or that disagrees with him in any way, and they are all either imprisoned or many of them are simply executed on the spot. Imagine that. That is the scenario that happened 6 days into the Hussein administration in Iraq. 6 days into the second Trump administration, that's already passed. And nothing like that happened. On a smaller scale, it's happening with these computer systems. I may have talked about that last week, but it is nowhere near. I did not. But it's nowhere near the level of speed that we saw in a place like Iraq. And so, and there's already resistance forming to it. So let's remember how bad it could have been. So a lot of these things are being challenged in court now. I don't know whether Elon will. Trump so far has shown that he will listen to and respect the courts. I don't know whether Elon will do the same, but they have started to issue orders freezing access in all sorts of different ways. I don't know whether it's a permanent freeze or it's reversible by the president, and he just didn't go through the process that he should have, but this access, at least so far, has been reversed, that Elon has. I think that personally that the courts should go farther and demand that the court staff have access to and oversight over, if not Congress, anything that is seen by Elon if he ever does get back in, because of the record that he already has. But that's beside the point. I could give them advice until the end of the age, and maybe one of you should take it upon yourself to give these people advice, especially if you know the law, to make sure that this doesn't work. So yes, these things have been going into court. I don't know how much that means, but it will have to be enough. When it comes to Russell Vote, Russell Vought, whatever you call him, Kash Patel, both of those people are having major obstructions put in the way of their confirmation by the Democrats. This is a second chance that we were given. We didn't get it with Hegseth. We have this second chance. So it is very important that you call and send letters to your representatives. I would prefer physical rather than email because those will stand out. It is very important that you do that, and you need to focus if you are talking to Republicans. First of all, if you have Democrats as your representatives and senators, what you should do. By the way, it's the Senate, not the House, that does this, so don't get that mixed up like I did. If you call your senators or send letters to them and they are Democrats, you don't need to influence them directly, but what you need to do is encourage them to be bold and have conversations across the aisle. They gotta do that. And what you need to do, just like if you're speaking directly with a Republican, you need to give them a script of this is what you need to talk to them about, and it needs to be based on self-interest. It needs to be based on why are they giving their power away, in the case of somebody like Vote. Why are they giving their physical safety away, in the case of someone like Patel, or we should have done this with Hegseth. And if you do manage to stay, and the election is the least of your concerns. The next election and the primary that you face is actually not as much of a concern. There are more immediate dangers, and if you do this stuff and somehow we still have, because it's not guaranteed that we will still have an election if you go through with this, but if we do, you will probably lose it because people will be angry about the chaos. And so we need to keep the pressure on them. And one thing that to speak about to them as well is this big, beautiful victory that we got in a Trump district in Iowa after the spending freezes and stuff like that. We got a special election victory in one of the seats that Trump poached from for his cabinet. And that is something that you should remind these people of. We could have a ton of those in 2026 if we manage to preserve the rule of law. And if we don't, then they are in a position of danger and vulnerability, and they're obsolete. And so you need to focus on self-interest in that respect. So, yes, we've had a lot of miracles. And by the way, if all of the special elections go the way the Iowa one does, we will have a Democratic House, which is something that we were completely not counting on. We will have a Democratic House if all of them go our way. And if one of them doesn't go our way and the rest of them do, then if a Republican gets sick or if another special election happens, like even if we don't, this is still a very miraculous situation that we're in right now. And we ought to be grateful for that. We really are starting to see miracles, which I wasn't expecting for a long time. I was getting more cynical. But we have been seeing miracles. But we can't rely on miracles forever. Miracles will not keep us alive from year to year to year to year democratically. And remember that. COVID itself was kind of a miracle. The fact that it happened when it did, and that it sadly took enough of the lives of people that would have voted in the wrong way, that we were able to escape Trump the first time, who was much more competent, and he probably could have pulled off an effective coup if he had won that time. More so than now. it's an absolute miracle that that didn't happen. And in most situations it would have, but we were seen through that. But we can't rely on miracles forever, and what we have to do is build a system of beliefs for people and a life, a public life that is worth living. And we haven't had that for a long time. This party, there was this third party that I was working with for a while before the election, providing advice to. And by the way, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I provided to them was do not run a presidential candidate because you don't want to spoil the race. And one of the things that I was providing to them as well was try to spoil it against Trump. Focus on Trump districts and stuff like that. So that was a big issue. But and full disclosure, I did actually vote for them in the election because I live in a blue fortress, and so I felt that I could vote how I wanted, and that is how I wanted to vote. That's also how I would vote if there was like a ranked choice voting system in Massachusetts. And so the core feature of the American Solidarity Party is that it is a socially conservative party in a variety of ways. Not to the point of, it's not a cruel party. It believes that we all have the right to be treated equally by the government under the 15th Amendment, under the Constitution. Is it the 15th Amendment? I think that's a voting rights one. In any case, we all are entitled to equal protection under the law and things like that. But it is a socially conservative party. It believes that we should be doing more to protect children from having to live in households that are dangerous or that are marred by divorce and cheating and crime and things like that. It believes that we should do our best to limit. Ultimately, most of them want to abolish the institution of abortion. Their main opposition to the Republican Party is the incompetence with which they actually try to do it, and the lawlessness and the lack of respect for things like the right to self-defense and the presumption of innocence. That's the main problem that we have. But this is a great, and that's probably the most controversial view we hold. But like a lot of our things, people want to pretend that they believe what we believe, but they're not willing to make the sacrifices to actually follow through with it. And that's one of the reasons why the Democrats keep losing. Even when they do well on the economy, which they haven't for a long time, but they did under Biden, and it still wasn't enough because the social issues were just destroying their brand. And that doesn't mean that we have to abandon our advocacy for people's constitutional rights. Like, you have a constitutional right to exist in public, to assemble, to speak, and you have a legal right to be treated equally in employment and constitutional rights to be treated equally by the government, no matter what you believe. And it doesn't matter if the person that's in power, agrees with your belief about, for instance, that you're a different gender than you were born. That is something that the state should be hands off with, in my opinion. I don't think that we should go out of our way to validate these people either. It is a relatively new phenomenon to be studied, and who knows, there might be harm, there might be even the medical interventions are relatively unstudied. I have heard apocryphal stories of cancer and things like that. So it is not, I don't think that we should go out of our way to validate these people, but I also think that we should be relatively hands off, and the Republicans aren't like that. But what we should do, I think, is we should focus on the rights instead of the people. People in general are generally sick and tired of hearing about and being reminded of transgenderism and the people that are under it, the people that are included in it. People are sick and tired of hearing of that, generally. But we have to defend the rights of individual people and to defend those rights in the abstract. The constitutional rights that we all have. So don't give that up. But when it comes to other social issues like the whole sex positivity thing, and I'm going to put a bunch of articles down in this description about this, we can't expect to win elections if we are creating a world that people don't want to live in, and people don't want to live in a world where their children have to grow up in fear of constant changes to their environment, or the introduction of strangers that can sometimes be dangerous, because that's what happens when you roll the dice on a random person. We don't want to have a world where children have to live like that. We don't want to have a world where everyone is less safe when people behave like this. And it affects those children when they grow up and when they vote and when they participate in society. It is inherently divisive, even if everybody agreed with it. Something I will be saying more in the future. Even if everyone agreed with it, it is inherently divisive. And so that's kind of the general platform of the American Solidarity Party, is we are going to produce policies that are neutral when it comes to things like religion and stuff like that. We might have come to them that way, but that's not how we justify them. We are going to create policies with the goal of making people safer. We're a broadly leftist party in terms of economics. We accept the reality of man-made global warming. We want to have the rich pay taxes. We don't want people to be above the law. We believe in tariffs in some cases. We are populists economically. And like the world that we propose, in many ways it's like the 1950s, but better, because of less discrimination and more respect for people's constitutional rights. And it is, in a lot of ways, that Leave It to Beaver thing. It is a peaceful world that we want to create, and it's one that's worth living in. And if that was put up against Trump, then Trump would have lost in a landslide. Nobody ever wants to commit suicide when they're given the option of changing their lives and having a blank slate. And if we could have offered that to the American people, and a few years later we probably would have been able to do so. I wish that the election was not timed when it was. Then it would have been like that. We would have won in a landslide. And so I'm not endorsing third parties now, to be clear. We are in a fight to the death against the idea of authoritarianism and of a totalitarian government that rules over every aspect of life. But in terms of the policy positions and the platform that it is, I think that we don't focus on single issues like the trans ads even. Don't focus on messaging. That's the problem. We focus on messaging. What about the product that we're actually selling? Maybe there's something wrong with the product. And, like, if we're not focusing on why so many of our people, 70%, I have statistics that I will show when I read my paper next week. When we're not asking why so many children have to grow up in trauma. And a lot of that was man-made and completely preventable. When we're not asking that at the Democratic Party, when we are letting people get addicted to things like pornography and sex addictions in general by the millions, and we have nothing to say about that, is it any wonder that people, and especially it's the people that recognize these things that did it, that recognize the truth about this stuff, but they have the wrong answer. They took the easy way out. They voted for Trump, and in a subconscious way, they were committing suicide when they did that. They didn't want to live anymore. That's a point I'm going to drill in. And I really want this to be a safe space for all of the people that did vote that way. But it is that's the motivation. And so that's what I have to say. Again, I'm very grateful for the victories that we've been starting to have. And you will have to watch whether they obey the courts or not. And if not, then something more direct, like a general strike, might be necessary. But if they listen to the courts, then that will be great news. It shows the senility that we're dealing with, and we really do have weak opponents, I think. And it's great to see that we have a second chance to be opposing these nominees. Again, even Hegseth got through on only one vote, and so I think that Hegseth has a lot of reasons to be the high watermark of this movement. So we have been seeing a lot of miracles here, and we can't rely on miracles forever. We have to have them. Without them, we won't make it through this 4 years. But we have to be building a vision of a world that's worth living in, and nobody wants to live in Brave New World, especially when it sucks and you have to work long, miserable hours, because it's never as good as they tell you in the propaganda. Nobody wants to live in Aldous Huxley's world. And so we have to build a world that people are willing to live in if we want people to vote for politicians that are going to have policies that help us have a collective life and have a future as mankind and not perish from the earth. And so that's all I have to say today. Take care. God bless. And I will see you next week. Sorry that I was a little bit late with my video. I'm going to try to stick to 4:30 for my videos from now on. Thank you. Goodbye.